Kansas. You know, there's been movies about Stull, rumors about Stull. Well, what's the real story behind it? So here is story number 1 on Halloween week. Okay, let's talk, Devan. Everybody knows about the story of Stull, Kansas. So I've heard, no, it started by a bunch of college kids. Yes, it's true. What's your story?
Well, there is the theory that it was started back in the 70s by some KU students, but as with most urban legends, you kind of start out with a little bit of truth, and then it gets elaborated throughout the years, kind of like a game of telephone. It is believed that Stull is one of the 7 gateways to hell. So with that, it means that any demon, even Satan himself, could possibly come and go through the Stull cemetery. So that leads to a lot of creepy critters walking around.
Now, some of the stories I've heard behind Stull was if you throw a bottle at the door or something at a certain time, or when the church was still standing, it wouldn't break no matter what. You've heard stories of people taking because it's torn down now.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Going back to the bottles just a little bit, one of the popular theories was that if you went to the church at midnight during the equinox and you threw a bottle at the door, no matter how hard you slammed that bottle against the church door, it would not break. I know people have tried it. They swear to God it would not break. Wasn't there? I'm not sure. However, I have talked to people that went there after the church was torn down. This girl decided it was a good idea to grab a rock, just a memento, a little souvenir. So she sticks the rock in the back seat of her car. They pull out of the cemetery, driving down the road, and the door flies open. First they thought, oh, well, I didn't get the door shut. So they close it. Door flies open again. It happened a few times. Finally, they decided, well, let's take the rock back to the church, and they went and stuck it back in the pile, and everything was fine.
Now, you say in the 70s, okay, that's kind of the rumor that college kids kind of did this thing, but it goes back much further. At least the legend goes back much further.
That's what we think. I have tried desperately to dig deeper into this to find the real story of Stull. I've even gone so far as posting on Facebook, to ask what's on your mind. I put Stull's on my mind. Who wants to tell me about it? But I cannot find a definitive date. And I think a lot of that goes back to the fact that, the internet is actually fairly new. So a lot of the current stories we have are dated, 1990s and beyond. I did read one account where they claim, historically, that witches were actually hung in the cemetery there at Stull. So if I can find more about that, that could possibly, maybe, be that original part of the legend.
So do you know, is it true, when the Pope came to the United States, he refused to fly over Stull, Kansas?
That's what I hear, but I haven't talked to the Pope, so I'm not sure.
So nobody really knows for sure, right? Brenda, you're being awful quiet about this whole thing here.
I was just letting Devan share.
Have you been to Stull?
Been to Stull.
I've been to Stull.
Did you feel anything when you
went to Stull when I was a teenager and in high school with some friends, and we were into photography. Thought, let's go to Stull, take some pictures, see if we, see what shows up, see if anything happens, see if we get some cool photos. And I got some beautiful photos. Mm-hmm. And the church was still standing at the time. And I took plenty of pictures of the church. It wasn't raining, so I don't know if the rain, because that's another theory, is that if it rains, the water won't come in through there's no ceiling.
Right.
So the theory is, if
yes, the church is always dry.
It's always dry inside.
Wow.
And I didn't personally experience anything at that time as a kid, but, I really want to go check out more things. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. There's an interesting part of this, because Brenda, when you went, you didn't see the stairs, right?
No, exactly. We went into the church. We had heard that there's this stairway to hell,
right,
and all this, and I've even had a couple of people come up to me and tell me when we're at events in multiple places, I went down the stairs and my brother went with me and he went back up and I didn't come up for 2 hours. And I thought I was only down there for a few minutes. That is a common occurrence that people report. Whether it's true, I don't know. If I don't see it and I can't experience it, or I don't physically see somebody go down those stairs, I'm going to send Devan down.
Oh, thanks.
We'll go out. We'll see if we can find the stairway.
What a buddy.
I'll send Devan down, and I'll sit with a clock, and we'll time it and see what happens. But, I don't know. I'm on the fence. Like I said, nothing happened when I was there, and who knows?
I have heard the time-lapse story with multiple people, and it's typically the same concept. Part of the group went down, part of the group stayed up, or they got separated, and And one person says, well, I was only gone a couple minutes. And they're like, no, you've been gone over an hour.
And that was the instance where a gentleman had come up to me at, I think it was Cider Days a few years ago, and said, I was the one that went down, and my brother went back up, and when I came back up, he said I was gone for like 2.5 hours.
Well, and the interesting part of all this, we're pretty good at reading people, because after you work enough cases, with paranormal incidents involved, you get very good at telling who's sincere and who really believes they experienced what they experienced. And overall, the girl that told me about the rock, she was scared. She was still nervous about it. And I spoke to an individual at the time lapse. I think I spoke to the same one you did. He was very, very sincere.
He was convinced that it had happened. I don't know that I was convinced, but he was very convinced that it had happened to him. But when I went, I never found a stairway. I never found.
I have read in a few accounts that the stairs are not always there. It's a similar concept of things appearing during the equinox or certain times of the year.
Okay, that might explain it then. Maybe it didn't show up when I was there.
So
is standing up on the back of my neck right now. We could have gone on for hours about Stull. Isn't that a great story about Stull?
Great story.
So it starts out. It could be an urban legend, could not be. Tomorrow, at this same time,
What are we talking about?
we're going to talk about the Rochester Cemetery and the albino.
Oh, lady that wanders around up there.
Selfies are nothing new.